Hello, and welcome to the White Rocket Podcast, now on video. Brought to you by White Rocket Entertainment in association with all of our great supporters via patreon.com. I'm Van Allen Plexico, and I'm joined for this special movie review episode by the yard sale artist, Jared Alberich, and his brother, Jason Alberich. Welcome aboard the White Rocket Show, guys.
Woo! I love it.
All aboard.
All the toot toot.
And I hope Jason hasn't started freezing up as soon as we go get things rolling. That's interesting. Oh, there it goes. Looks better now. Okay.
So far, so good. But hey, man, I can't tell you how happy I am to be here. I love the show. I'm all about talking about Auburn football. Is John going to be joining us, or?
Well, perhaps you got the wrong invitation there, Jared, because tonight we're talking about, as you see rolling across the bottom of the screen, if you're on the video,
right.
the first three Jack Ryan movies. We're going to talk about The Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, and Clear and Present Danger, based on the novels, loosely based in some cases, on the Tom Clancy novels of the same names that came out in the 80s. So we've got 1990s movies about 1980s novels. And I want to kind of get you guys background on Clancy and the books and everything, but I would point out, to me, the Clancy books are very much, especially those early ones, are very much a product of the 80s. You know what I mean? They just feel like when I think 1980s, I think The Cosby Show, The A-Team, Prince and Michael Jackson and Tom Clancy novels, pretty much. I mean, that's the 80s right there. So, Jason, let me start with you. You've been a Clancy reader for a long time, right? What's your connection with those novels? How far back do you go, and what do you think of them?
Oh, Van, I go back to the beginning. I picked up Hunt for Red October when it came out. I read it when I was in high school. Read it cover to cover. Read it a couple times. Absolutely loved it. Read Red Storm Rising, which came out shortly thereafter.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite books to this day. I love the attention to detail. I love the character development. And Clancy, when he came out of the gate, he came roaring out of the gate with those early novels. So, yep, I got in on the ground floor on that one, Van.
And the interesting thing too there is, just like, and this is something that Jason, that Jared certainly will know what I mean here about Bond. When the first Bond novels started coming out, remember it was John F. Kennedy that famously endorsed From Russia with Love and made it kind of picked up the sales in America. Well, Ronald Reagan loved Hunt for Red October. And, he went on the record saying it's the perfect yarn. He loved it. And that kind of made people all go run out and pick up Hunt for Red October. I feel like Hunt for Red October was originally published by like a very small niche press. They were the only ones that would publish it. Go ahead, Jared.
I beat Jason with the hand up. The United States Navy Press printed his original books, and he ended up making a boatload of money for the United States Navy. Yep, it's a very bizarre situation in that he wasn't getting published, and for some reason, I guess maybe his military connections, maybe he had a friend, I don't know, but maybe Jason knows that part. But yeah, the U.S. Navy Press ended up printing some of his early books, and that really launched him into superstardom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he got a bigger deal, and I guess a reprint deal with a bigger mainstream press. I guess it was a matter where the editors in that era didn't think that because it was kind of unique, right? His kind of books, he was the first, I guess in some ways, he's kind of the grandfather of this sort of modern techno thriller that combines global politics with technology. You really didn't, I mean, you had like Robert Ludlum and Frederick Forsyth, but they weren't doing the techno stuff. They were just doing the thriller stuff. And maybe you had some military stuff, but nothing like he was doing. And he kind of combined that cutting edge, here's what the military's doing right now, technologically, as well as doctrine and everything else, with that fictional plot engine, that pulp story. And that was brand new. And I guess a lot of editors said, we've never seen anything like this, and we only publish stuff that we know, right? That's how a lot of publishers are.
Yeah, I guess there were some similarities, you could say, to the Ludlum novels, or maybe the Alistair MacLean novels, that type of thing. But I think what really set this apart was it definitely captured the zeitgeist of the Cold War. I mean, it really captures the essence of the Cold War, and Ronald Reagan put it best. It was just a terrific yarn.
Yeah, it really had that 80s Reagan kick the Soviet Union's butt. I mean, I guess you kind of had to, it's one of those things where you kind of had to be there. You know, I think younger people today, it's just impossible to appreciate that zeitgeist you mentioned, just what it felt like to be in the United States in the early 80s when, you know, all the way through the late 70s, the Soviets had been kind of kicking our butt at stuff, or we'd been like, you know, the hostages in Iran and the Carter administration, there was just a lot of stuff going on that people were kind of depressed about and down. And Reagan came in and waved the flag and, well, God bless America and all. And I don't mean this is like necessarily a political endorsement or criticism. You know, if you like Reagan, great. If you don't like Reagan, I don't care. Not my point. My point is there's no question, as a history professor, I talk about this all the time, there's no question that he changed the public mindset in the 80s to one of like gung-ho, let's go kick butt. You know, we're number one. And Clancy's stories just dovetailed right into that, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it even goes back to, you know, the end of the Vietnam War. I mean, we kind of had our teeth kicked in. And like you mentioned, then you had the oil embargoes of the 70s. And I think America was just really, you know, kind of down on the military, down on the government. And
Watergate, yeah.
Yep. And like you said, love him or hate him, Ronald Reagan came in there, and you can't deny that he possessed the power to motivate. He had a lot of charisma. Whether or not you get behind his policies, like you said, Van, don't care. You can't deny that his influence on the United States. And then we started seeing that influence in the media, including books like Hunt for Red October, we started seeing movies like, you know, Rocky, Rambo, a lot of those, let's celebrate the military as opposed to sitting here mourning our past losses. So I think this book really summarizes that, or characterizes that, that moment in time, which we were lucky enough to live through.
That's right. Yeah, it was interesting, and I think it really does encapsulate it. So, Jared, what was your connection to the books? Were you reading them back then or later, and what did you think about them?
I've actually never read them. Not sure what I'm doing here. No, I'm kidding, of course. No, I came to him later than Jason because, you know, I was in like middle school, grade school when Jason was in high school. I'm 5 years younger. So that's a little ditz, you know. I was aware of them, and I was like, these are the cool military books that my brother reads and my father reads. So definitely was aware of them, but I came to them probably, I'd say maybe 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, with the proliferation of audiobooks. And about 10 years ago, it wasn't so much Audible, but CDs, books on CDs. And you know me, I'm a big yard saler. You know, they call me the yard sale artist. So I would find these at yard sales, books on CDs, and that's how I came to them. I really listened to all these books later in life. Like, I'd already seen the movies by the time I came to the books. I did teach on academic circle for the Air Force when I was in my Air Force career up in Montgomery at Air University. And Every Man a Tiger was required reading there. It's on the required reading list. So that's sort of an oddball Clancy that not a lot of people talk about that's out there. So not related to what we're doing tonight, but I've encountered him. I think that's the only one I've actually ever read, you know, in its physical book form. Otherwise, audiobook. I did want to add to the power of Clancy in the 80s discussion. I was at a Trivial Pursuit competition a few years ago, which I won, naturally. But the question was posed to me, who were the 3 best-selling authors of the 1980s? And I used my yard sale powers, and I thought, well, which authors have I seen from that era more than any other when I go yard sale to yard sale? So I guessed Stephen King, Tom Clancy, Danielle Steele. And I was correct. So, I mean, we're talking, you know, people might think Clancy, oh, he's the guy that does the Splinter Cell video games, you know. That's kind of how he's known in modern lore, those Tom Clancy video games. But man, in the 80s, you couldn't turn around without finding him or King or Danielle Steele on the shelf somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. And some would argue that over the course of time, the editorial reins on him got looser and the books got longer and longer and kind of harder to read. Those early books are tighter. I mean, as we're going to talk about The Hunt for Red October and Patriot Games, those two books were very tight, I thought. You know, you get a little bit later on Debt of Honor and Executive Orders and all that, the dragon and the tiger and the bear, the zoo, whatever. They start getting longer. Yeah, they get longer and thicker, and I'm just like, okay, we had 30 pages on how the Japanese build something out of wood, and I just didn't need to know that at all. So started fuzzing out on me that at that point. But I was there for like the first 7 or 8 of them and really enjoyed them. Certainly in their time. I'm not sure how they hold up for me now. But in the 80s, as a product of that decade, I thought they absolutely were just like perfect, right on. And so, well, let's segue then to in the late 80s, and Jared, you and I have talked about this kind of thing before with our James Bond shows, how real world events come along just as they're making a Bond movie, and it kind of becomes awkward, like the Cold War ends, what do you do, you know? Well, that same thing happened here. Clancy's early books were all set during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and before they make a single movie, the Berlin Wall comes down at the end of '89, just as they're finishing up filming Red October. And by 1990, Germany's reunifying, and just a few months later, the Soviet Union would collapse by the end of '91. And so over a 3-year span, everything those books were about totally changes. And so let's talk about how that affects this movie, The Hunt for Red October. This is a John McTiernan directed film. Hold on. There it goes. My audio does something funny sometimes. It was a John McTiernan film. I believe he was fresh off of Die Hard. So if I hadn't, what?
Part 2, I think, because the first one was 87. Yeah. And the second one was 90.
You talking about Die Hard?
Yeah.
Die Hard came out summer of '88.
Fair enough. Proceed.
And then he was filming this in '89, and it came out in '90.
I'm prepared to believe you.
So he had a big, in other words, I love Die Hard so much, I would have gone to see this if I knew nothing about it. It just so happened that I'm like, oh, that's that first Tom Clancy book. I really like that. I'm looking forward to the movie. And so it's funny because we actually talked about this movie by itself on a Dragon Con virtual panel last week. And I was pointing out then that, everybody else on it just loves this movie. It's one of their favorite movies. One of the panelists is their all-time favorite movie, which I never would have guessed it was somebody's all-time favorite movie. And I was saying, well, when it first came out, I didn't love it because it changes a certain amount of stuff from the book. And I was not thrilled with that. But every time I've watched it over the years since 1990, and I've watched it about once every 10 years, probably. I probably watched it about 2000, maybe 2005, and then 5 years ago, and then about this year. So maybe 5 years. Every time I've watched it, this is the 30th anniversary, I've liked it more. I think this one has actually aged better than any of them because it's kind of a time, if you get past the Soviet trappings, which are not really necessary, it could be Putin's Russia, when you get past those trappings, it's just a solid story with cool characters. So you guys are nodding, but for those listening on the podcast, Jason, tell us kind of about the movie, your reaction then and now to Hunt for Red October.
Well, back then, it's been a while since I watched the movie. I remember liking it when I saw it. I think I kind of felt like that feeling you sometimes have when you really loved a book and you saw the movie and you're like, it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the book better. And this time, in preparing for this podcast, watching it again, I kind of agree with you. I just kind of watched it. I kind of let go of the Cold War feelings, and I hadn't read the book in a while. And you're right. It's just well acted, has a lot of great performers in it. It's it's a tense thriller. It doesn't give you a lot of boring places. It's moving, and it doesn't
it snaps right along. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't coddle you either. You have to pay attention and keep up. And I found it very enjoyable. And I think you're right. I think you could set this story in any generation and have a good tale. I think there's definitely, obviously some Cold War elements still remaining, but overall, that was my impression on this rewatch. Great actors, great characters, tense story, and well paced.
I think so too. Jared, same thing. Watching it again recently, I believe you said you did. Did you find you liked it more or less? Kind of having the book in the rearview mirror a little bit. What did it do to you?
I liked it more. I've always been a person who is my mutant superpower is to separate book and movie. I do that really well. Like I don't ever like, oh, this didn't follow the blah, blah, blah. I just watch it for what it is. And for a Cold War submarine thriller, it's excellent. It's a really good flick. And let's be honest, when I was going to see it in 1990 as a teenager, I'm all in for Connery. I'm going to see Connery. That's why I'm going to this movie. I don't care about the Tom Clancy books. I'm like, it's a Connery film. He's got a cool haircut. Let's see what this all. I mean, the movie poster is dope. I mean, it's a great poster. I think it's done in a single color. I think it's just black and red.
Yeah,
and it's really cool looking. And that's the only reason I wanted to see it. And I watch it, and it's this great film. And I'm the guy who turns it on its ear because I came to the book after the movie. And so I listen to the audiobook and I go, oh, okay, yeah, there's some differences there. But having first sampled the movie, that is now my baseline. And I'm like, this book is good, but it drags in spots.
It's true.
And like Jason said, the movie's crisp. And I think the reason it's crisp, and Jason said this too, is because it demands that you pay attention. If you zone out for a little moment, then there's 3 submarines going on, 4 submarines going on at any given
You got to
moment.
know which sub you're on. Yeah.
There's an American one, a Russian one, another Russian one, another American one. Yeah. If you don't keep up, you are screwed, man.
But they do a good job of letting you know which sub you're on. I thought they
the
have
lighting and the coloring.
Yeah, it's really good.
And the Russian one apparently had cigarettes all over the floor.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say, this to me is my second favorite Cold War era submarine movie after the great Alistair MacLean's Ice Station Zebra, which I dearly love. I love Ice Station Zebra. I've watched it over and over and over. Like Howard Hughes, I could just have it on a loop and just keep watching it all the time. It's so cool. But this one has more actual like submarine stuff going on. They just kind of use, on Ice Station Zebra, there's that one scene where the sub almost goes to the bottom and then they pull back up. Other than that, it might as well be the Enterprise going to another planet. It might as well be a bus driving to another town. The sub is really just a conveyance. It's more about the characters. Whereas this movie is a real submarine movie, and everything that happens in it involves the fact that these are submarines, that they're able to be silent, the Caterpillar drive on Red October. And, it's funny too. Jared, you said that Connery kind of brought you in, and I was like, Sean Connery, what? I was like, that was the one casting thing. I'm like, okay, so Alec Baldwin is Ryan. Sure. I kind of was envisioning, oh crap. I was envisioning Field of Dreams.
Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
Susan Sarandon.
I was always kind of envisioning Kevin Costner.
I was too.
Ryan.
Yeah. Me too.
But I thought that Baldwin did a really good job. In fact, I like him better as Jack Ryan in this movie than I do Harrison Ford playing him in the other 2 movies. And most people seem to think that. But I was like, Sean Connery, and I guess we had a Scottish, Spanish, Egyptian in Highlander, and so what was so big deal about a Scottish, Lithuanian, Soviet in Red October? So in honor I wore my Scottish soccer jersey for Captain Ramius, the Scottish, Russian, Lithuanian, Soviet sub-commander, who,
by way of Egypt.
Yeah, Connery is the only actor other than Jason Statham that does their own accent and everything and just dares you to say anything, right? They both just play whatever part, and you're like, but Mr. Connery, you're using a Scottish accent and you're playing, what's the problem? Nothing. It's good.
Don't get Jason started.
You're fired.
Statham is the same way, man. And I don't, honestly, with both of them, I don't care, right? With both of them, I'm like, you're awesome. Just do your thing, you know? Statham is like, it's so funny. Statham used to always try to do like an American accent or something. And after 2 or 3 movies of that, they just said, screw it. Just use your own accent. We'll make something up. And it's funny. There were like, I don't mean to go off on a tangent here, but Statham went through 3 phases. First, he tried to do an American accent and failed. Then in the phase 2, he would use his normal kind of Cockney accent, and they would come up with a story reason like, oh, your husband moved here, right? The American wife. Oh, your husband moved here from England. Oh, he's so funny. Third phase, they just ignore it. They just don't even.
No, he's reached Connery status.
Yes, they don't even remark on it. It's like this random guy from Texas sounds like.
Jason and I recently watched The Wind and the Lion, where Connery played a Berber. Didn't even try. You know, that's the beauty of Connery. It's timeless. You know what, though? This does open the door for me to talk about one of my favorite things from a filmmaking point of view. I don't know if this is the first time they've ever done it. Probably not, but it's the first time I ever saw it, and I thought it was brilliant how they were speaking Russian and subtitled, and then they zoom in on the mouth, and the actors just start speaking English, and they zoom back out, and I thought that was very creative filmmaking, and I've always thought it was cool.
Absolutely. The only other movie I can think of that does that is The 13th Warrior, but they do it in a different way.
Because he listened.
I listen.
Well, he starts picking up pieces. He starts picking up
it's
pieces.
Time lapse. That's the thing. They both use a cinematic device, but with 13th Warrior, time passes. Days and nights go by. Sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's brighter, darker, and he's listening. Whereas with this, they just zoom in on his mouth and they come back out, and we can, So I always figured that that was not originally in the script. And Connery, after the second day of filming, is like, I'm not doing any more Russian. You're going to have to come up with something. I'm not speaking any more Russian, man. I'm not doing subtitles. Just come up with something. We all study Scottish English in this scene. Just talk that way the rest of the movie, you know. I love it. So what was what do you think is like the strongest and the weakest parts about this movie? That might be a fun way to go. And we can do that about the other two too. Jared, you go this time. What was like the strongest thing for you about this movie and the weakest thing?
Okay, strongest is going to be easy, and it's going to be broad, but I mean, it's the cast. I mean, not only do we get Connery, we get Sam Neill, we get Scott Glenn. We get Alec Baldwin. We get freaking Tim Curry in a bit part. It's like every time you turn around, it's got Gates McFadden from Star Trek: The Next Generation in it for one scene. Much.
Yeah,
I'm like James Earl Jones. I'm still going. The dude who played Jonesy, he's a great actor. I can't remember his name.
Yeah,
Jonesy's awesome, great character. So to me, the highest of the highs is just this ensemble class just clicks on every single. Skarsgård is in it, for goodness sakes. I'm still going.
It's true.
I'm like the cast is just nuts.
Samuel L. Jackson's in it because that's the law.
Was he in this one? I know he came in.
He's like a commander or something. Yeah,
I couldn't remember that. I know he comes in another one, but sure.
Maybe I'm thinking about another one.
He's in Patriot Games.
Games.
Well, he might as well have been in this.
He might as well, yeah. But yeah, bottom line, that's the real strength. As far as a weakness, man, I really like this movie. I'll just take a pass and listen to someone else has got a weakness and maybe pile on, but nothing springs to mind. It is that good, that engaging, good flick, and I'll pass it to Jason.
Jason, sir.
I think I'll go with. We talked a little bit about it. I'd say the pacing, the story, and the pacing of the story keeps you engaged. It's one of those that could easily bog down, and it doesn't. It keeps your mind focused on the story the whole way. So to me, that's the strength. The weakness, and this is just kind of a minor nitpicky thing for me, was we were just starting to get on the cusp of the green screen and the digital effects. And some of those digital effects looked a little weak. And some of that green screen you could really tell was green screen. So, so from that perspective, the effects were early 90s and it showed. So it doesn't hold up quite as well. But again, that's getting real down in the weeds and nitpicky.
The only time I really notice it is, I think, at the end when they're coming in
the river.
They're coming in the river. That one definitely feels like green screen or back projection-y. I'm not sure which one they were doing. That was the one that really stood out to me.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm very forgiving. I know Jason is too. I know he went to the bottom of the barrel to find a nitpick, but I'm pretty forgiving about old school movies. Of course, you're gonna have old school effects, right?
Right.
But yeah, I do find it distracting at that end scene though, when they come out on the river.
Which is too bad, because it's a nice little solemn wrap up to the whole thing where they do the fake Columbus quote and welcome to the new world and everything. And you're kind of going, what's going on in the behind them there with the sky all crackly? But okay, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. I guess, you guys, I mean, the two things you mentioned, the cast and then the way that it's structured, I guess, similarly, I would say the way that they pared the story down into a very fast moving, clean, A to Z, while still managing to get in enough of the little. I mean, it's kind of a combination. They do what Jason said. They have it very pared down, fast moving, but like you said, Jared, they managed to fit in a little bit of good quality screen time for each of the main characters. Like even if it's just a snippet, they get a little bit of character stuff in. We even see Ryan buying the little stuffed animal for his daughter, and
same bear from Die Hard.
Was it really? Oh, wow.
That's what I read in the trivia on it.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't realize that, but that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, it has a lot of the same things going for it that Die Hard did. You can tell, McTiernan was really in his element back then in the late 80s. It's got some of the same crisp, it's I think too that it makes good work of the fact that there are really multiple leads to this movie, that it's not just Jack Ryan. I mean, Ramius has as much of a leading role, as much of a protagonist in it as, there's not really a bad guy. I know that that Skarsgård as the sub commander at the very end is kind of the bad guy, but honestly, it's a story where the adversary is like the situation. Like even the Soviets aren't that bad in it. They're more like James Bond Soviets than they are evil villain Soviets, Right. And so it's like it's like they're trying to solve a puzzle more than they are trying to fight a battle. Like they put that one little battle in at the end almost just to give us some conflict, but it's really more like trying to work, first it's Ryan trying to work out the puzzle, and then it's Ryan and Ramius together trying to work out how to make it play out well. So
right. They do it so well that I'm jumping in. Sorry, I got fired up. They do it so well that the Soviets from the Red October, as they're cheering on their captain in his battle, you like you said, they're not evil. You're like, this is what soldiers, this is what military people do. And you're kind of with them in a small way. You're like, yeah, support your boss, man. Support your commander. That's how you roll. I don't know. Maybe that's just a military perspective.
Well, no, but they're not up to nefarious deeds necessarily. So there's no reason to be wanting them to die or anything, So yeah,
fair. Yeah.
I thought it, and that's another thing is that really, you have the saboteur and you have Skarsgård as the Soviet enemy commander, and that's pretty much the only villains in the piece. Even the Soviet ambassador that's kind of like representing the other side, he really gets played for laughs more than anything else. When he comes in, they're like, "Have you lost another submarine?" He's like, wah, wah, wah,
So, but you know what, Van? He had diplomatic immunity.
That's that guy.
I knew you weren't going to be able to resist it.
Yeah. Oh, I knew. Yeah, I absolutely recognized him. He's great. How did he never end up in a Bond movie, Jared?
I don't know, but he did end up in a Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes episode, so that was cool to see him in that.
Oh, I don't remember that, but I'll have to go back and rewatch them all again. It'd be neat if there were like a podcast talking about those that I could be on and talk about them. But
I know of a podcast that talks about them. So part A.
I watched the entire. I've watched them all the way through several times over the years, so I guess I'm overqualified to talk about them on a podcast.
Our people will call your people.
Where did it go? I was just going to show you something, but I don't know where it is. I got like the box set here of the entire series somewhere, but anyway. Anyway,
I can go get mine if you want.
So, all right. So, Hunt for Red October. We can come back to it at the end and kind of recap, but let's circle around now to Patriot Games. This was the third, I believe, Clancy book because it's the second Ryan, right? He put out Red Storm Rising. That wasn't a Ryan book. That was he and another guy that had played Harpoon, and he was basically wanting to role play World War III without nuclear weapons. And I have never read a book as intently as I read Red Storm Rising because I'm like, oh my God, it's World War III. I got to know what happens. And that was a thick book too,
with lots of stuff going on too.
Yeah, lots of stuff. But there's not a Jack Ryan in it. It's like a book of all the supporting characters from all the Jack Ryan books having World War III, you know, without a super secret agent guy. So he does Patriot Games, and this is a much more personal story. It's weird. This one has bad guys, particularly the movie. It has, you know, really bad guys, and it is a very adversarial relationship between a very good guy and a very bad guy. And it instead of the Cold War, it gets us into the troubles, right? The Irish, the IRA, and all of that. And so, Jason, talk about Patriot Games a little bit, the movie versus the book, and whatever else you think is relevant in terms of just what do people need to know about that movie, and what did you think about it?
Oh gosh, yeah. I think the movie, it's been a long time since I've read the book, but it seems to me it followed at least the plot and the spirit of the book pretty well. I mean, the gist of it is that Jack Ryan finds himself in the middle of what they believe to be an IRA plot, but it's a splinter IRA group that's trying to attack members of the royal family, and he disrupts it, and in the process kills the brother of one IRA terrorist. And that sets off this whole course of revenge. The book I found kind of interesting. I kind of felt like this is where Jack Ryan starts coming into like superhero status a little bit. That kind of bothered me a little. I remember as I read it, and that translated on the screen too. I thought I kind of preferred the Jack Ryan from Hunt for Red October, who's just a guy that kind of finds himself in the middle of this thing and has to rise above the occasion. And here, you know, it's like I say, just a little more superhero status than I would have liked. But having said that, I did enjoy the book, and I did enjoy the movie. It's probably out of the three that we watched, it's probably the one that I enjoyed the least, but I still liked it an awful lot. If that's simple enough for you.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think I'm totally on board with that. Jared, your thoughts on Patriot Games?
Largely similar to Jason. Surprise, surprise. I will take up a little bit for Harrison Ford, Jack Ryan superhero status because I did some research on the movie. Let me not lie. My wife researches movies while we watch them and tells me things. And she pointed out that Harrison Ford didn't want Jack Ryan to be James Bond. And so that's why when the blonde guy tries to assassinate him on the street, I mean, he gets away, but he gets his butt kicked. And that was by Harrison Ford's design. He's like, this character is not Indiana Jones. He's not a fighter. He's just trying to survive. And so I will give it up for that. He will continue to, in the next movie, get a little more comfortable in an action-y role. But I do think Ford plays it well in that he never seems comfortable in the action role. He is a little superhero-y at the beginning in that opening scene where he stops the terrorist attack. But he plays it well. I think he's got a look of desperation on his face. It's not like, let's do this. It's more like I got to do something, So that's the only slight tangent I'll take from Jason. And I probably just got tainted from that stuff that Johanna was reading me, but I thought it was pretty good. I will. Well, you know what? I'll save my low for when we get to our highs and lows at the end. What about you, Van?
I totally agree. I think that Harrison Ford in this part, in both of the two movies he does, this one and the next one, the third one we're going to talk about, in both of these movies, he goes through the entire movie, and those watching on video can see me and I'll describe it, but he goes through both movies like this, kind of like making that, oh my gosh, what's going on? He never looks like, Superman. He always looks like, what the heck is happening here? Oh my gosh, I'm going to die. And that it's funny. I think in some ways it's why I kind of like, I get what he's doing and it's effective enough, but I didn't feel like in Hunt for Red October, Alec Baldwin did that. I don't think he had to resort as much to being like looking terrified all the time or shocked all the time to get across that same effect. I'm not exactly sure what he had more of like a befuddlement look, like, through most of that movie, like, what's going on here? I'm trying to figure it out. Whereas Harrison Ford just looks harassed throughout both of these movies because he's kind of is being harassed, certainly in this one, and long stretches of the next one. But yeah, it's more of a personal story. That was the thing, is that, like I said, Hunt for Red October, there were several leads. Jack Ryan was probably the main one, but Ramius wasn't far behind. And like you said, Jared, he's the guy on the poster. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of hard to say that Alec Baldwin is the clear A1 leader character in Hunt for Red October when he's not even on the movie poster, but somebody else is, and it's not like a half-naked woman like they might do. It's another guy gets the poster, So whereas this movie, it's clearly Harrison Ford versus Sean Bean. That's it, right? Everything else serves the two of them working their way eventually to a showdown. It basically turns into like GoldenEye, in a way. It's almost like they could have just kept taking those boats out to sea and ended up at Arecibo in Puerto Rico and fought up on the and Sean Miller would be like, I feel like I've been here before. And then when Harrison Ford like knocks him off and he falls, he's like, not again.
Poor Sean Bean.
Like, oh, I know, man. But
you did bring up something that I wanted to mention that Johanna did in her research while I sat next to her. But apparently Ford was on the table for Red October, and he passed on it because he said the Russian submarine captain was the better role.
See, I know the other half of that story. Jason, do you have something on that before I?
Oh, I thought that was interesting because later on he plays a Russian captain on a submarine in K-19, the Widowmaker.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah, my understanding, the other half of the story, that totally sounds 100% plausible. But what I'd heard was that they had Alec Baldwin, and then he was in negotiations to be in Patriot Games. And he wanted to be on Broadway in Streetcar Named Desire, and they were having a hard time negotiating the money and the schedule, script approval. There was a bunch of things that were in the way. Meanwhile, the studio had canceled a movie Harrison Ford was going to be in, and they said, well, is there anything else you want to do? Because we got this one movie here. And he's like, oh, I could do that. And so he kind of stepped in, and Alec Baldwin was apparently not happy about that.
That is true. That is the continuation of the story. Harrison Ford, the only hurdle they had was he had director approval. They'd already tagged Philip Noyce from Blind Fury, which Jason and I recently covered on Action Film Face Off.
Right.
And Harrison Ford had never heard of him, even though he'd done Blind Fury. But he'd done like some artsy film that none of us have ever heard of. But when it was mentioned to Harrison Ford, he was like, oh, that's him? Yeah, I'll work with him. And it was like, what? You picked the film no one's ever heard of. But yeah, absolutely. That's the story I heard as well. Basically, Baldwin kind of chose the Broadway play over the film.
Over being an action multiple series star.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's more to it, but yeah. because I can't imagine him passing that up. I think he would have done it if he could have. But shoot, I'm blanking out of it now. McTiernan. I think he was set to direct it, but he decided because it was going to be, they were going to do Clear and Present Danger second. They had a John Milius script for Clear and Present Danger, and I don't think that the production company, and I think Tom Clancy didn't like it. So they decided to go with Patriot Games instead, at which point McTiernan, who was Irish, said, I can't direct this. And he stepped out, and they brought in Philip Noyce to replace McTiernan.
Oh, I didn't know about the director thing.
Yeah, so he swapped out too. So you end up swapping out the actor and swapping out the director for different reasons. And you have a whole different, so it's weird. It's basically like a series, but with different people taking over after the first one. I mean, we're used to that with Bond, where you swap out Bonds occasionally, you swap out directors almost every movie. But it's not something American series do as much, I don't think, as British ones do. So that was, and that reminds me of a question I was going to ask you guys both. Are you surprised that there have been as few Jack Ryan movies? I mean, I know there's a TV show now, but that's just the last couple of years. And I'm enjoying it. I've watched the first couple of episodes now. I'm kind of late to it because I'm like, Jack Ryan, I wanted this show 20 years ago. I'm not sure I want it now, Because now it's like we've got Homeland, we've got so much CIA analysts doing stuff now, but in the 80s, we didn't have that. In the 90s, you didn't, in the 80s and 90s, the FBI was still the ones that they were making all the shows about. The CIA were in the shadows. Oh, don't make a show about us. But somewhere along the last 15 years, it switched, and the FBI became the bumbling idiots in every show and movie, right? Oh, the FBI is here to screw it all up. Think about Die Hard, right? It was the first. And the CIA became the guys that are saving the world, right? And Homeland is the one where, like, even a clinically insane CIA agent can still save the world every season because she's nuts. And so I'm like, do I need a Jack Ryan show now? Not really. But, man, if this show had been on in, like, 1997 or something, that'd have been my must-watch TV every week. I just felt like they waited way too long to do this. So I forgot what my original question was.
Why are there so few?
Yeah, if this was a British franchise like Bond, I feel like we would have had a Jack Ryan movie every 2 years for the last 30 years. Why did we only have? And they're all so different. It's like they completely reboot with different actors and different everything every 10 years when they redo these. So, what do y'all think? Whoever feels like addressing that, if anybody.
Yeah, gosh, I guess I'll take a go at it here. I think that originally Tom Clancy was big, and there was the Cold War element, and that carried over from the end of the 80s into the 90s. And then we kind of had the post 9/11, the post 9/11 world that we were living in, and it was all about fighting terrorism at that point. And it's not that Tom Clancy didn't write stories about that. I mean, I'm thinking of like Rainbow Six, and some of them got turned into video game franchises. But yeah, I can't figure out. I guess they did try to do. Didn't they have that Shadow Recruit, Tom Clancy Shadow Recruit? And if
Jack
you notice,
Ryan Shadow,
yeah, Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, and it seems like they've tried to evolve him more and more towards a Jason Bourne, James Bond type character.
Absolutely.
Up to the most recent one that's on Amazon Prime, which I've enjoyed. I've thought that that's a good show, but I think it just kind of had its day in the 80s and 90s, and then got kind of overcome by events, and maybe now poised to make a comeback with what's his name, Krasinski. Playing Jack Ryan seems to be popular. So who knows? Maybe we're seeing the second wave of Jack Ryan right now.
Well, Bond was able to bridge the divide between the Cold War and the post-Cold War pretty effectively, but I would argue that Bond was never really about the Soviet Union and the Cold War quite as much as Jack Ryan was. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. It just always felt like the whole Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan thing, maybe it's just because the first book was so much about that.
Well, we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but I really think that with Tom Clancy, those first few books were really a labor of love. And he put a lot of effort into researching the equipment, the history, the uniforms. He was very descriptive in his books, and you could tell there was a passion for the Cold War. By the time he's writing the post 9/11 stuff, he is a big name, and I just don't think quite the passion was there. They felt to me like, kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of common novels, common thrillers, common shoot 'em ups, and I think that maybe that's part of the reason why is it just there wasn't that passion there that you were able to capture and translate onto the screen like his Cold War stuff you were able to do.
That's interesting. It really is. Jared, what do you think?
Being a little younger than Jason and being into video games, I think video games played into that more than we might realize. I think that video games start becoming on the rise because I think they dropped Some of All Fears was early 2000s. And that was the last Jack Ryan movie, I think, period. 2002-ish.
Well, we had the Shadow Recruit thing with Captain Kirk, right?
Okay, yeah, I never did see that one. And that might have come out later, too. My point being, as we get closer to the late 90s where video games really start taking a larger piece of the entertainment pie, and Clancy is insanely successful at them. His Rainbow Six games and his what's the other one, Jason? What you play stealthy?
That was Ghost Recon.
There's Ghost Recon, and there's another one, Splinter Cell. Splinter Cell is the other one I was trying to think of. So he gets wildly successful at games, and games, I mean, are starting to, I'm guessing, are paying him more than books at that point. And I think that's where, Jason says you see more commonplace novels. I think Clancy starts becoming hugely successful in the video game world, which wants me to beg the question that you brought up, Van. You said, well, James Bond succeeded. It might be because of James Bond's failure at video games that the movies succeeded so well. Because outside of GoldenEye, there's never been a blockbuster James Bond video game. I would know. I'm doing a literal documentary about this.
I liked From Russia with Love a lot.
And there's some good ones, but nothing that sold like the Tom Clancy series. So I suspect that might have been a diversion or a big boon for him financially. So I think he put a little more energy into that. I mean, you only, as Van, this, as creators, we only have so much energy. And when you start to split it between video games and books, I think you might get those more watered down books that Jason was talking about. But I mean, the dude's empire just grew exponentially with video games. I think that might have played a part in it.
And he was into computer stuff from the beginning. I mean, like I said, Red Storm Rising was based on computer simulation games that they were wargaming of NATO versus the Warsaw Pact back in the 80s, on very primitive computers. They were doing basically war games like the movie.
Like the movie, yep.
Yeah. So, another topic I've been trying to cover on this show for a long time, but I'll get around to it eventually.
Hit me up, man. We just watched it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm wanting to do 80s Reagan-era Cold War movies like Firefox, Gorky Park, and War Games, and a couple of others, and kind of do a show talking about all those. So
RoboCop. All right, maybe not RoboCop. I just like it.
It's of that era, but it's not of that era.
Red Heat.
So yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of that. Okay, so let's wrap up then. Patriot Games. Jared, you can go this time. Strongest and weakest things about that movie, in your opinion?
Like Jason, it's my least favorite of the three, but I still like it. I would say strongest thing, I think it builds tension well, as it's supposed to get to that climax at the Ryan home. And Samuel L. Jackson, James Earl Jones, and of course her name is going to fall in my head the minute I went to say it. I've been thinking it this whole time we've been talking. Ann Archer.
Yeah,
she's incredible. I like her a lot. So I do, and I think that's why she got. Excuse me. I think that's why she got brought back for the second film. I think she's really good, and so I just think that those are probably the highs. The lows, and this bugs me every time I've seen it. Prepping for this podcast was probably the third or fourth time I've seen it. This bugs the heck out of me. Okay, so they're leaving the house at the end. They're sneaking out. Right, the bad guys are trying to kill them. They go down. They very cleverly hide everybody, while Jack Ryan goes out to a boat. And he's like, "Oh, he's taking one of our boats. Let's go get another boat, right? Let's go get him." They have to swim there just like he did. So if you're Jack Ryan, you cleverly hide everybody. You swim to the boat, and then you just wait there. And when they start swimming towards you, you shoot them all. That's the end of the movie. It's like that.
Or their
extravagant boat chase.
They could have taken both boats. They could have taken both
boats and left.
I was wondering that too. Well, allegedly, the original ending was that Jack and Sean fought in the water, and test audiences really didn't like it, and so they went back and put in more of a big ending. But that was what a lot of the critics didn't like. Critics were like, "Oh, suddenly it became an Indiana Jones movie or something." Yeah. Which I think Harrison Ford makes them think that. I don't think that's an Indiana Jones ending, but yeah, they had to sex up the ending, as they say, right? Because it was not fireworks enough just to have them kind of fight and him die. So they had to drag it out. Like they did everything back then. All those 80s action movies had like the triple ending. You know what I mean? Bad guy stopped, hero and heroine hug. Bad guy pops up in the background, fight again, kill him again. They always have to do that and drag it out. So
yeah, it's just that one left a whole lot of plot holes. But otherwise, like I said, I liked it, and I'll go highs and lows to Jason.
Yeah, I think the highs for me was I thought Sean Bean was a terrific villain, man. He was a powder keg ready to go off in every scene. And I just really thought he gave a tremendous performance. I also liked, even though he wasn't in it an awful lot, I love seeing Richard Harris in anything. So,
he was good in it.
Oh, man, he was fantastic as well. I think that the weakness is kind of the ending. I thought it ended up being kind of a hokey 90s action movie ending. I wonder if because the producers had Harrison Ford, they felt compelled to do an Indiana Jones-esque ending, like you were saying. But it just didn't quite work for me. But overall, really good film. Enjoyed watching it again.
Most people I've heard from like the third one, the one we're about to talk about here in a second, more than this one. But I got to say, I like this one better, honestly. Not as much as Red October, but the thing I like about Patriot Games, I like that it does a completely different conflict. Well, all three of them do completely different conflicts, to be fair. There's the Cold War, there's the Irish IRA thing, and then there's the drug war, and they're three completely different areas. That's good. I'm glad that they kind of spread it around. But I liked that this one was very personal. It's kind of like Jack Ryan 2. This time it's personal, I liked that this time it was just a clean cut. Jack does something that he just normally would do, trying to be a hero, gets himself hurt, right? He's not Superman, he's not Captain America. And it turns into this vendetta. It's the kind of thing that we see in, Alistair McLean type stories and other stories from that era. Bond movies kind of, have touched on things like that, where you got you got this vendetta and the villain's trying to track him, the hero, down the whole time. I thought it had a lot of tension. I liked that they brought Jack's family in, put them in great danger. the big showdown at the house is very contrived. Certainly the last act of the movie is very contrived, right? We're going to have everybody out at the house where they're vulnerable. And, oh, what a shock the bad guys show up. Who saw that coming, you know? They should have said they were going to go there and then just had nothing but like CIA agents waiting with machine guns. And when the IRA guys roll up, they're done. You know, there's nobody there except them waiting with the guns, you know. But no, I thought it was a very tight story again, kind of like Hunt for Red October, compared to Clear and Present Danger, which I've seen it like 4 times now, and I've read the Wikipedia summary. I read the book, and I still am not entirely sure what's going on in that story. It's just, to me, that one, Clear and Present Danger, and we'll segue over. To me, Clear and Present Danger is just one complication too many. We're well into the 90s when it comes out, and we're into that 90s habit of having to add 1 or 2 too many twists to these stories. The Bond movies suffer from that too, right? If you look at like the late 80s, early 90s Bond movies, like think about Living Daylights. It's a great movie, but there's you always get the sense with Living Daylights that there's like 1 too many plot twists in there, and you kind of go, whoa, wait a minute, what? You just go with it, but whoa. And this movie, to me, Clear and Present Danger did that a little bit because there's so many moving parts. Whereas one of the things I appreciate about Patriot Games is that there's not a lot of moving parts to it. It's very straightforward, right? I mean, the only real complication you have in Patriot Games is that there's kind of like 2 groups of Irish people, and Sean Bean's crowd is more extreme. And once you kind of figure out that Richard Harris is like the more moderate, and Sean Bean is with the more extreme, and they don't see eye to eye necessarily. Once you get that, there's really nothing else to figure out about the movie. So, you guys, last thoughts about Patriot Games before we segue into the last one, Clear and Present Danger? Was that fair, Jared, what I was saying, you think?
Well, no, because The Living Daylights is one of the greatest movies ever made. I mean, clearly.
Yeah. I was biting my tongue on that Living Daylights.
No, he's actually right. We do joke about it. Living Daylights has an overcomplicated plot. I'm still not sure about diamonds for heroin. I don't know. Anyways, but no, the point is well made, and I think you're right.
What happened was
I think you're right. I definitely, and we'll talk about it as we segue in when we get to highs and lows. I will have a low wrapped around the overcomplication. Questions I have that I don't know that there's answers for. Maybe you guys can answer them, but I'll let you know when we get there.
Well,
yeah, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, Jason, I forgot. Did you go by all means?
No, I think that you're absolutely right. The strength of this movie is it's very straightforward. It's man versus man, and it's. I guess the thing that I find weakest about it is it's just really loosely tied to historical events and the IRA when compared to the Cold War and Russian naval history, that rich mix that we had with Hunt for Red October. I just kind of wish there would have been a little bit more IRA history woven into this story like it was in the book. I think if you're looking for a good Harrison Ford action movie with IRA elements in it, The Devil's Own is probably my preferred movie over this one.
I haven't seen that one. I do know that we have another James Bond in a movie about Irish terrorists, right? The Foreigner with Jackie Chan.
Yeah, that was good.
That's a good one.
Good movie.
Another great, and Pierce, of course, is Irish, so that worked out very well.
Both were fantastic.
Yeah. Let's segue into the last one now, Clear and Present Danger. And then again, at the end, if there's anything else we've left out. Because I don't want to like break down every plot detail of every movie. I just want to have a general conversation about what we thought about these movies and kind of how they stand up today, you know. So Clear and Present Danger, I mean, like I said, it's a movie that it's a little more complicated. You bring Harrison Ford back. You bring back, I guess, Admiral Greer, James Earl Jones one more time.
Mm-hmm.
I would have given anything if like Jack had messed up and Greer had risen up from the hospital bed and said, "Jack, you have failed me for the last time."
Where's the soundboard?
Nah, I'm not gonna go there on this show. But yeah,
Han Solo and Darth Vader in the same movie.
It's true. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, as buddies. Who would have thought?
Mace Windu in the previous one.
That's right. And no Beverly Crusher, though. To cross over. So, yeah, this one is the drug war. And I remember that, like, Cardinal of the Kremlin came out, the book, and it was, again, we're in the Soviet Union, the Cold War. And then right after that, the Cold War kind of ended. And all of my friends that were Clancy fans were all like, what's he going to do now, right? I mean, what's Clancy going to do? He writes these Cold War books other than Patriot Games. What's he going to do? And, of course, nobody was really surprised when Clear and Present Danger came out and it was all about Colombia and the drug war. It was kind of like, in fact, I remember reviewers saying, I guess Tom Clancy has decided that the next big thing is the drug war. And I don't know that it works as well, but for this story, I thought it was pretty effective. So, Jason, let's just do it one more time. You read the book, right? You saw the movie. What was your reaction when Clear and Present Danger came out?
I thought that this movie really got to the heart and the spirit of the book. The drug war itself is really kind of a sideshow. What this movie is about, the Clear and Present Danger, is the abuse of power at the executive level. And Jack Ryan is, at this point in time, he's a senior level analyst. And obviously he kind of ends up, because of Greer's failing health, ends up in a position of power that he is woefully unprepared for. And as such is manipulated by those who have their own agendas, or are using, the power of the CIA and the military for their own ends. So I thought that the spirit of the movie really matched the tone of the book. I enjoyed it. Again, it's much more of an actioner on this one, and we see Harrison Ford even more go into that man of action role. Although, to your point, Van, he does look like a man that's in over his head. I thought that the final scene there, where he has to jump onto that helicopter, and the look on his face, I think any one of us would have looked at that same look if we'd had to do it. So kudos to the acting chops of Harrison Ford there. But yeah, I thought the book was overall entertaining, interesting, and the movie captured the spirit of it rather well. I enjoyed it.
Jared, what's your thoughts?
It'd been many, many years since I'd listened to the book, so I had no memory of it. And watching Clear and Present Danger for this podcast was my first time. I realized as I was watching, I'm like, I've never seen this before.
Wow, interesting. Cool. Okay.
Known of it, and I'm like, I've never seen this before. So I was very engrossed in it. I was just gonna, once again, Jason and I are cut from very similar cloth. I was gonna say the same thing as Jason, that the drug war angle is really just incidental. It truly is about the machinations of power abuse and things. And as a leadership training professional, I had a field day watching this movie, especially watching the president and his leadership decisions in the film. But overall, it was really, really quite good, really exciting for me. I'm all about sort of cast and crew. So seeing the bad guy from Desperado was cool. And Agent Coulson, 5 points for anybody who spotted Agent Coulson in that movie. Jason, you don't count because I already pointed him out to you.
Yeah.
What was
Okay.
he doing it? I don't remember.
He has like 2 lines. It's the scene where they're going to recruit the sniper guy who's sort of the focus of the military team, the young sniper, and he's crawling through the grass.
Oh,
and
Chavez.
Yep.
Chavez.
Master Sergeant is sitting there trying to find him. Agent Coulson is the guy standing next to the Master Sergeant.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. I didn't, I guess I noticed it and then forgot. Yeah.
I was just like, before he got picked up by S.H.I.E.L.D., there he is, hanging out. But those are all tiny details. I'll just agree with Jason overall. I liked the scope of it. I liked that we got to see boots on the ground combat action along with machinations of political intrigue. It felt very much like a Jason Bourne in that way. Jason Bourne's always about who's trying to help him and who's trying to screw him over at the highest levels, and that's what that felt like to me. Of course, this predates that, but this is the first time I've seen it. So there you have it.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I remember very strongly from the book that we only got a little peripheral touching on in this movie was it seems like Clancy really made a big production out of Cortez, the assassin, seducing the American woman because her apartment overlooked the right view he needed to shoot somebody. And so we got scene after scene of him, romancing her and everything. And then finally, when he kills her, it's a shock because you're like, my gosh, he's been romancing her for half this giant thick book. And then all of a sudden he just kills her. And you're like, what? Whereas in the movie, you kind of saw it coming because you knew who he was and you knew what was going on. And it didn't have quite the same impact, I didn't think. I may be misremembering a little bit, but that's the gist of it. So that was the main thing to me that I thought, because they kind of had to hurry a lot. There's a lot that happens in that book, and they have to squeeze it all down. Now, we do get, one thing I really like about this movie, we get Mr. Clark. And for those that have read those early books, Mr. Clark is one of the draws, right? He's one of the best things about those early books because he's the shadowy CIA operative that goes out and does the dark ops, the black ops and stuff, and that other people can't or won't do. He's like the guy that they will disavow any knowledge of if he gets captured or whatever. And he even has a book of his own, which Without Remorse, which I thought was one of my favorite.
Mine too.
Clancy
I was
book.
going to mention that as well. That's a fantastic book.
Maybe you guys can help me. Is he sometimes referred to as the clandestine in this series?
I don't.
I've heard that term bandied about in the Tom Clancy realm. The clandestine is like a badass agent out in the field. I'm wondering if it was that Clark or maybe that's a video game thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't remember him being referred to as a clandestine. However, in the books, I mean, that is kind of his role. And he is kind of Greer's ace in the hole, so to speak. And if you read the book Without Remorse, it tells his Clark's whole story and how he ends up being indebted to Greer and becoming the character that he is.
Is his character in the what's the one that had all the names are falling out of my head now. The Jack Ryan movie of the early 2000s was
Some of All Fears.
Some of All Fears. Was his character in that? Was he played by Liev Schreiber?
Yes, he is played by Schreiber in that movie.
Okay, that's the dot I'm trying to connect. I've heard a couple people refer to him as the clandestine. I don't. Maybe that comes from the video games, like I said. But okay, so those are the same character. That's the bridge I was trying to make.
I thought that Defoe was really good as him. I didn't think I was going to like him, but I thought he did because he had that attitude. He kind of had that total disdain for Ryan. Like, you don't know what you're doing. You have no business here. This is my domain. Get out of here. I thought that was one of my more favorite parts of this movie and this story. Is that they had to work together, but they had to earn it. They both had to figure out that each other was on the same side and kind of come to halfway trust each other. It's like the first time we see them together, and I thought that was very effective. That was very good.
Very much so. One of the things I noticed watching it for the first time, I liked the on-screen chemistry between Ford and Defoe so much that I was like, they should do more movies together. That's how much I enjoyed their on-screen time together. I thought they played off each other really well.
Yeah, I thought one of the best scenes in that movie was when Chavez comes out of the jungle and starts attacking Clark, and it says, "Whose fault is it?" And Ryan says, "It's my fault. It's my fault," and that sets the tone for the three of them. I thought that was well played.
And that is a strength, by the way, I think, of the movie, is when we get the three of them together, they work really well together. They're three very cool characters that were in kind of different directions. And when you bring them together and kind of get them on the same page, I do really like that. Yes. I think we had maybe one too many Latin American warlords kind of confusing me. We had one too many I guess there was the shenanigans going on in Columbia, and there was the shenanigans going on in Washington, D.C., and there were connections, obviously, very strong connections. But after a while, they started kind of doing this to me, and I'm not sure why this person's trying to assassinate that person. I'm like, wait, what was who? So it just wasn't as crisp and clean of a story as the first two. And I guess that was kind of the point, right? It's about how Washington engages in these Machiavellian, labyrinthine operations, and they get blowback, right? It could be called blowback, honestly.
Well, and the thing of it too was, you have this whole movie of point, counterpoint, quid pro quo, things escalating, people dying, and then in one scene back in Washington, D.C., around the table, the national security advisor says, "Man, I think we need to stop this." And the president's just like, "Okay, make it go away then." And that's it. And they're done. And they've walked away from everything and left this mess and left all those soldiers out there to die, and left Ryan out on the limb to take the heat for it. So I thought that was, I think that's at the heart what the story's all about. Just these capricious decisions that people in power make with no care about the consequences of their actions.
And you know what? I hadn't thought about it till you said that. This is the one of all three of them that I could almost see in some ways being a Jack Reacher story. I could see Reacher being the Clark character, and I could see Reacher being the Jack Ryan character, depending on different stages of his career. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other two, there's no way. He doesn't do that kind of thing. But I could see a Reacher story where he's exposing a corrupt government official and getting involved in combat out in the jungle. That both would fit him. You know what I mean? Sure. Maybe not necessarily the Tom Cruise version, but but the more literary version that looks like Cam Newton. I could see that playing out. We're supposed to get, by the way, a Jack Reacher series starring a guy as big as Cam Newton. Because, I always say that he's described in the books as being the exact same size as Cam Newton. 6'5", 250 pounds. That's exactly how big Cam is. So,
and Tom Cruise, both.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay. So, strongest and weakest, if we haven't already covered that, any strongest thoughts, Jason, about this one?
Oh, I think that this one definitely has a lot of action. It's got a lot of twists and turns that you've got to keep up with. I think I'll just say for strongest, it has one of the scenes that gets me every time is that scene with James Earl Jones as Greer dying on the bed and giving Jack that one last lesson and saying, "You'll remember, if you will, that you swore an oath." And that's what stirs Jack into action. And that scene gets me every time. That's I think that's my favorite part. Probably my favorite scene in all three of these Jack Ryan movies.
That's interesting. That's good. Jared?
Oh, sorry. Least favorite?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Somebody needs to fire Jack Ryan's secretary because the moment he needed to make a copy, PC load letter? Are you kidding? What? No paper? Come on, man. Yeah, secretary needs to be fired.
Well, I of course love the scene that Jason referenced. I'm going to give the movie props for action. Like Jason said, I'm going to cite an action scene that's kind of hard to watch, and I'm sure Jason will back me up on this too, is when they are tricked into the blind alley, and that is absolute terrorist tactics, destroy lead and vehicle, and then slaughter everybody in between. What a tense scene. I know both Jason and I have been a little too close to that before, and hard to watch, but if it's hard to watch, that means they did it right. So it was incredibly well done. But yeah, a little hard to watch, but overall great. Of the three movies, I think this one has the best climax. We talked about how that it was a little weak and tacked on for Patriot Games, and we talked about how there wasn't really there's kind of a forced battle at the end of Hunt for October. This one had that, We got the sniper guy, we got the spec ops CIA guy, we got Jack Ryan just trying to get along. I thought that was a great end. And then to wrap it up with the intrigue of the political stuff at the end was incredibly good. My low, and I'm going to go back to something you said at the start of this, Van, was Cortez wooing the other secretary, right? In this one, it wasn't about apartment placement. It was just I think he was getting information from her that she didn't even really know she was giving him. He was picking up clues about movements and things from her. And then he goes and meets her in the woods, right? At the cabin, romantic. They start kissing and all that. And then he kills her. And I'm with you, Van. I'm like, why? All he did was kill a source of information that didn't even know she was giving betraying information. Why would you kill that source? It made no sense to me that he murdered her. And if you're going to murder her, at least have the fun evening first. She was totally into it.
She was going to cook dinner.
I know, right? Like he blew his whole evening with that move. But all right, jokes aside, though, I never understood why he. I mean, did they need to show us he's a bad guy? I knew he was a bad guy. It makes no sense strategically to kill her.
I felt like they were copy what was in the book, but it wasn't the same thing, like you said. I'm sorry, Jason.
No, I was going to say exactly the same thing you were, Van. I think they were trying to get the spirit of what was in the book, but what was in the book made sense.
Yeah.
Because, but this one, I got the sense what they were trying to say was, well, he killed her so she couldn't reveal what he looked like or who he was. But, I mean, the fact that he killed her probably would have, well, it did start.
Yeah, it put more dogs on his trail than anything else.
Yeah. So it didn't quite make as much sense. I think they were trying to equate it to the book, and it just didn't work out quite the same.
My final thought, Van, and I'll toss it back to you. I told you I did look at it from a leadership point of view, and I've had leadership discussions with Jason before about this very topic. Good leaders never have to remind you that they're in charge. And that's why I thought the movie did really well, because at the end, when they went face to face, Harrison Ford and the president said, "I'm the president of the United States." And I'm like, that's the surefire moment that you have lost control and you are no longer the leader. And I thought, well done, movie. As a leadership trained professional, I thought you got that detail right.
That's cool. I wouldn't have thought about that. I guess kind of like intuitively you can appreciate it, but I hadn't thought it out literally the way you described it. So that's really cool. That's pretty cool. I think, that's good stuff. I think that, by the way, what I read was that John Milius again had written a script for this that Tom Clancy didn't like. In fact, Clancy didn't like any of the scripts for any of these movies. They kept rewriting the Patriot Games. I think they rewrote it like 3 or 4 times, brought in different writers. They rewrote this one. But Milius' script got thrown out for this one, except they kept him around as a consultant for the SUVs in the alley scene, because he wrote that in one of his drafts. He had that scene and they liked it. And they wanted to have that action set piece, and so they kept him around just for that. But other people wrote the rest of the movie. But
he got it. He got it right. It was tense.
Yeah. And I feel like we've seen that scene 100 times since then, but that was the first time we really saw it. Because I've seen it, I'm sure I've seen it on Homeland. I've seen everything like this on Homeland at this point.
They just did it again on season 2 of Jack Ryan.
Okay. Yeah, I'm 2 episodes into season 1, but I'm enjoying it. I'm going to keep watching it. In fact, I'll probably watch some of it tonight. But I guess if I'm going to say the strongest and the weakest things about it, one of the things I really did like about the movie, well, for one thing, I like that we had Harrison Ford again. He's not my favorite Jack Ryan, but let's at least keep the same guy around more than one movie. Because if Harrison Ford hadn't done this movie, we would have a different Jack Ryan in everything. We would never have the same Jack Ryan twice, right, if you think of the TV show as one thing. But the other thing I liked was, I liked that for the first part of this movie, it comes across very much as almost like a police procedural in Washington. So I guess that's like a federal procedural, in the Capitol, in the government. And then suddenly Harrison Ford is in the middle of Colombia with people trying to blow him up and kill him. And I'm like, oh, see, so it kind of, it zigged instead of zagging, and it gave us a completely different kind of movie, which leads us to the other cool stuff, which is Ryan having to, basically the tensest moment of the movie is, will our two heroes try to murder each other because Clark didn't trust Ryan? And they have to come in. And then Ding comes in and you get the three of them, which are awesome. So to me, that was the best part, was pretty much everything that Jack did after he had to go to Colombia and work with them. But I think maybe my weakest thing, other than that it was a little too complicated maybe, and that's fine. I mean, it's the most bureaucratic, I think, of the three. You get a little bit of that in Red October, not really any of it in Patriot Games. It's the most Jack at work. You know what I'm saying? It's the most Jack at work dealing with bad fellow employees, really bad fellow employees. It's almost like evil The Office, you know? and except that the bad boss is the president of the United States, and then Cutter and Ritter and Mr. Furley and all them. Yeah, I felt like it had a lot going for it. I just wish that it just got a little too confusing for me in places. And again, I've read it, I've watched it several times, and I still kind of go, man, it's just one twist too many. But I think it did do a lot of things that we hadn't seen in this kind of movie before, and pioneered the way. And that's pretty cool, right? Because a lot of things that come along after it copy it or take their cues from it. So any last thoughts about this movie, Jared?
Just to add one more plot twist to this film, I sat there the whole film trying to think, where have I seen this actor before who played the lead head drug dealer guy? Where have I seen him before? And then it finally clicked, and I realized that after this movie, he got put in a witness protection program, and he went down and did some digging for John Hammond and found that amber with the mosquito in it to start Jurassic Park, because that was the actor where I'd seen him before. He was the guy doing the dig that found the amber at the beginning of Jurassic Park. Wow. So that's how I'm connecting the two movies in my head.
Wow. Boy, that is a stretch. Yeah.
I've been trying this whole episode to figure out how to get that stupid comment in there, and there you have it. But no, overall, I really enjoyed going back and doing this journey. I'd never really watched the movies back to back to back, and I'd never seen Clear and Present Danger, as I found out when I watched it this time. So this was fun, and I'm glad you put it together.
Yeah, cool. Jason, any last thoughts on Clear and Present Danger, or like the trilogy overall?
Well, the one thing about Clear and Present Danger that really bothered me was that scene where he tells the president, no, you should say you were lifelong friends. And like, I don't understand how that strategy would work. Because if I'm a reporter, it's like, you were lifelong friends with the drug launderer. You don't find that odd? But I just like, I don't get it, man.
It seemed weird. The only explanation I came up with was it's sort of the classic strategy of lean into it, and be like, sometimes people would reward you more for showing loyalty or friend. Yeah, we were lifelong friends. I didn't know this was happening, and this is awful, but I'm not going to betray my friend. And maybe they would reward, the public would reward your loyalty in some way. That's the only way I could explain it to myself. Okay. But I was kind of with you, Jason. I was like, that strategy doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's just like, I haven't seen that guy in years, man. I went to school.
Well, I don't know. That's the thing, though. Jason. I guess the idea is, most politicians would go the other route and go, I've never heard of him, I don't know him, I've never met him, I've never seen him, and everybody's immediately going to go liar.
Yeah, and then if you get exposed for that, it's even worse.
Pictures will turn up, right? Yeah, and so it's kind of like, there's that saying, lean into it or hang a lantern on your problem.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess that makes sense.
Pretty much. It still did come across as weird because they didn't give us any real context for it. You had to kind of figure it out yourself. So,
yeah. But overall, enjoyed Clear and Present Danger a lot. Liked all three of these movies, and I enjoyed watching them all. Binged them both in like 2 days. So it was fun. It was fun watching these again.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that these three all came out in the 90s. It would have been nice if they'd had the same star in all three. Either if they'd had Harrison Ford, I don't know if would wanted Harrison Ford. It would have been interesting to have Harrison Ford and Sean Connery together in another movie besides Indiana Jones 3.
Yeah, but I don't know if I could have seen Alec Baldwin in either Patriot Games or Clear and Present Danger, because those are both way more physical for the Ryan character.
It's true, and I as much as it would have been neat to have Harrison Ford and Sean Connery together in another movie, I don't know that I wanted that older, world-weary Jack Ryan that Harrison Ford plays to be the guy that's in. Because a lot of Alec Baldwin in Hunt for Red October is that he's young and kind of inexperienced and just kind of going on his instincts. And that's not who Harrison Ford was playing in those other two movies. It was like two different Jack Ryans, honestly.
Yeah.
So, Jared, you look like you have a thought about that.
Oh, well, I was going to pass the question around, and no one is prepared, so I don't know if anybody's going to have a great answer or not. But if you had to recast it and you can't use either one that are in it, you got to pick that third one. Who would you pick to do your trilogy? Van, you mentioned Kevin Costner. Would you stick with that, or? And when I say recast it with actors that were available in that time frame.
Back then, yeah, I think that Costner totally could have done the Harrison Ford movies. I'm kind of glad Alec Baldwin ended up not doing Patriot Games, because I don't think it would have been I don't see him as that Jack Ryan. So, and I don't see Kevin Costner playing Jack Ryan in the Hunt for Red October. I think you'd have had to find somebody more contemporary. I mean, I guess that Costner was probably maybe the same age as Alec Baldwin, but he seems older somehow to me. Alec Baldwin just seemed really young. Maybe it's because we're so used to Alec Baldwin today. You go back and watch Hunt for Red October, he seems really young in that movie.
He's looks like he's in his 20s.
I know.
Yeah,
he did look young. I know. Yeah.
And I don't know who in 1990 you could have gotten that would have been. I mean, not
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce Willis would have been about the right age, I guess. But even Willis was kind of a little more world weary by the time of Die Hard. I would want somebody that's younger and doesn't kind of have that "I've been around the block a couple of times" kid kind of look to him, So I don't know. I'd have to dig out a casting book from 1990 to figure out who would match that.
What do you think, Jason? Rutger Hauer? Yes? No? What do you got?
Rutger Hauer would have been awesome as Jack Ryan. No, I mean I was kind of along the lines of Van with Kevin Costner, and in my mind, that's who I actually saw playing the character when I read the books. And I think he could have done the physical elements of Harrison Ford. And I'm thinking back, I can't remember the name of that movie. You guys help me out, where he plays the naval officer that was actually a Russian spy.
No Way Out.
No Way Out.
No Way Out. There you go. So I was thinking of him in that movie, and I think that character could have translated well into Hunt for Red October. So yeah, I guess Kevin Costner would have been my cast.
Yeah.
How about, I thought of a couple from that era. How about Jeff Daniels?
Not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad. I was just thinking of, I'm terrible. I got the great name in my head, and then it falls out the minute I want to talk about it. I was originally leaning towards, and stay with me on this, I was originally leaning towards Michael Keaton. Would have been fun to watch in that. But now that Van said maybe somebody a little younger, then I kind of thought, well, what about Tim Robbins at that time? Could have been an interesting cast. And then I had one that I really liked, and it fell out of my head. I'll just shout it out later when I remember it.
Matthew Modine?
Not bad. Like it.
Kind of that same era,
I remember who it was. This was, if we're talking 1990, why not Val Kilmer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I think Val Kilmer.
I think Val Kilmer in 1990 is about as close to Alec Baldwin in 1990 as you're going to get.
Yeah, and he stays in good shape all the way to Batman Forever. So you get him pretty much all the way to the mid-90s in good shape and very handsome.
Oh, if
after
only
Tombstone, he let himself go.
Yeah, well, some things happened after.
Well, he knew he was never going to get another part as good as what he got in Tombstone, man. He stole that movie and took it home with him in his pocket. But I was going to say, if only we could have gotten somehow, some way, if we could have gotten Arnold Schwarzenegger as a Soviet officer in one of these movies, Like if he, I mean, I know it would have destroyed Hunt for Red October. It would have just like thrown it out the window. But I just wish.
Well, they had what's his name, Sven Olsen, the guy the big guy that was from Conan.
He trained with Arnold.
Yeah, he was on the Russian sub.
But I've still maintained, and you mentioned Tim Curry earlier. I maintain that one of my favorite parts of Hunt for Red October is Tim Curry popping up in a completely unexpected role as a Soviet submarine doctor. And we actually talked about this a little bit on the Dragon Con panel that he sells it. He's like, he's 100%. He's never, you know what I mean? He's 100% loyal beginning to end. He's totally fooled. And they basically just pull the wool over his eyes the entire movie because you don't want to kill him. He's cool. He's a nice guy. He's trying to help people.
Yeah. You need him to panic to sell your grand plan.
Yes.
He's an absolute pawn.
It's beautiful. I love it. He is.
What does that say about him as an actor, though? Tim Curry is an actor. We all know how outlandish and gregarious he can be, but in this role, he takes his part and he does his job and sells it. I mean, to me, that speaks volumes about the range of acting that man can do.
And as Jerry was saying, there's so many great actors in that first movie, but Sam Neill, I think, also deserves special recognition. The whole thing running through. I mean, when you go back and watch Hunt for Red October now, knowing what we know now, as soon as Sam Neill starts talking about wanting to see Montana and a big buxom American woman and his suburban vehicle or whatever, as soon as he says that, you're like, oh yeah, he's gonna die. You know, you immediately realize there's no way, right? He's dead.
I'm going through his locker. I'm taking all his nudie mags and all his candy because it's like, you're not gonna be needing this.
He's that dude in the cop movie who's like, it's my last week until retirement. You're like, oh no,
100%, 100%. He is the cop about to retire. That's exactly right, and it's so sad because he's such a nice guy. He's such a cool character. It's like they decided somebody has to die. It needs to be the nicest guy. He's kind of the Agent Coulson in a way of this movie, you know, the self-assured, nice officer that ends up kind of sacrificing for everybody else. And it's sad, but maybe he should have come back in his own ABC show from the dead. See, and he could have been Lieutenant, whatever his name was, you know, Montana Sheriff.
I've watched that show.
Oh my God.
With his buxom wife and his pickup truck. This Russian sheriff out in Montana.
2 buxom wives, man. He's got 2.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine like a couple of drunk guys are fighting in a bar in Helena, and all of a sudden the cop pickup truck rolls up and the sheriff gets out and he's like, "What are you men doing?"
I am slinking. You are going into the car now.
I would watch the crap out of that show, man. That would have been what a missed opportunity.
What a missed opportunity. Van, you'll be proud of me, Van, though. I did use that movie as a teaching point for my son when he started talking about, could I go from here to here? And I don't need papers. And my son was like, what's he talking about? So I was like, pause. Let me explain to you how things worked in Soviet Russia.
In Soviet Russia.
But I thought you'd appreciate that since you're the professor.
You don't need papers. Papers need you.
And I got to explain to him. I was like, you know how we just get in the car and go to the beaches in Florida? I was like, in Soviet Russia, you had to get approval and you couldn't move from one state to another. And he was like, what? I'm like, yeah. So it was an interesting history lesson.
Very humorless guards will check your papers at every opportunity.
Jason and I have done the route back when there was an East and West Germany into Berlin. We have been through Checkpoint Charlie and all that stuff.
Yeah,
we've seen the humorless guards.
Yeah, I was there when the wall came down.
Yes, we were.
Man, wow, that's awesome. That is so cool. Well, guys, we could talk all night about these, but I think that we can't.
I'm at 10% battery. So
okay, well then.
Personally, I give Jason 1 chance in 3.
Oh! I'll take those odds.
I think it's worked out pretty well then. So I think we've covered them pretty well. And I mean, again, we haven't gone into super detail. That wasn't my goal. I just want to kind of reminisce about these movies and kind of how they've held up and what we thought about them then versus now and everything. I think we've pretty much covered all that. That's good. So I guess at some point it would be nice, you guys, if you want to look at in the future, we could look at those other 80s movies like Firefox and Gorky Park. And you mentioned a couple of other ones that kind of fit into that same motif.
War Games.
Yeah, War Games. Absolutely. We'll have to do that. So, all right, guys, thanks for joining me. And I think the rocket's going to get on out of here for another episode. We'll see you guys down the road.
Bye.
Bye.